All right.
Cool.
Hi.
Hi. Is this where we do introductions, I
I guess
guess?
I guess so. Do you want to
Oh,
tell us who you are?
sure. My name is Elizabeth Nelson, and I am a singer songwriter in the band The Paranoid Style.
I'm Amy Rigby, and I'm a musician and a songwriter, writer, and we're here looking for the magic.
Nice. So, how are you, Amy?
I'm okay. I'm doing pretty well after a crazy couple weeks, couple months. Um, what about you? You've had a lot to deal with uh,
Yeah.
personally, and
Yeah. It's been a crazy couple of weeks, starting with the election and then my dad got sick, but it seems like the election went in a direction that I can sign for, and my father is improving. So
oh, good.
I'm better than I have been previously. So yeah, it's great. Have you been listening or reading to anything um, that
Yeah,
you recommend?
I
Okay.
have. Um, I just finished reading Peter Frampton's book,
Nice.
which I, was kind of been looking forward to finding out. I mean, I discovered him with Frampton Comes Alive. Only in retrospect, learned about that he was in Humble Pie and The Herd, and just had this really started at a super young age playing amazing guitar. And it was just such an engaging book. He just seems like a lovely, lovely person, and it just left me feeling really pleased for him to have kind of like gone through this whole crazy ride of having like the biggest selling album of all time in the 70s, and just how crazy that must have been, and just to be so humble and down to earth. And anyway, I really recommend the book.
That's awesome. I will totally check that out. I also I'm in the middle right now of Chris France's um,
Oh,
Remain in Love memoir
yeah.
about being in the Talking Heads, and I'm kind of just actually not even in the middle of it. I guess I'm still in the beginning because he hasn't even gotten out of college yet, so they haven't really started Talking Heads. He hasn't even met Tina yet, so but so far so good. He is he's very very interesting. His life is completely unlike mine in that he was sort of a child of extreme privilege, it sounds like, and seemed to just kind of float through life, at least early on. So but I am excited to get to the point where they put the band together and work with David, and it's I think it's going to be getting wild pretty soon.
I'm looking forward to reading that. I had no idea that he I dipped into it a little bit when I found out that he had like Pittsburgh beginnings. And I grew up in Pittsburgh, and I had no idea all this time. I kind of thought I knew about him a little bit, but anyway, I'm looking forward to reading that.
Yeah, it's funny. I actually thought of you because he does talk about being in and around Pittsburgh, and I had wondered if maybe the two of you had like crossed paths at any point when you were kids. Because um, I don't know. I thought maybe you guys were like hanging around the same kind of clubs or something. When
There was like no. I mean, when I was growing up in Pittsburgh, the drinking age was 21, unlike the surrounding states, West Virginia, Ohio, New York, New Jersey. They were all 18. And so Pennsylvania was just like this kind of closed off where there were no clubs to go to for somebody who was like a teenager. And I left when I was 17 anyway, and
right.
went to New York City. Well, he was already there by then too. So yeah, I think you know, unless we'd been in some like, you know, like dancing class together, you know, where you did like where you like some awkward, like where kids, you know, did like sort of pretended to do ballroom dancing or something, and the boys wore little suits and the girls
Hmm.
wore like puffy dresses. We would have never encountered each other,
Right.
but I'm looking forward to finding out like where he hung out and stuff growing up there.
Yeah, I think you'll dig it. I'll let you know how it goes if it actually goes south. But I have really high hopes. I've been enjoying it a lot. Um, so cool. So um, I guess this week we're going to talk about, actually meeting your heroes. It doesn't sound like you got to meet Chris France. I'm assuming you haven't met Peter Frampton. Um,
I actually, it's crazy, but I played a show at the Bluebird in Nashville probably about 20 years ago, and he was in the audience. I mean,
no.
and I didn't, thankfully, did not find out till after the show because I would have been terrified, you know, because it's such a small place. It only
Hmm.
holds like, I don't know, under 100 people. So, you know, had I known that he was there, I would have just thought like, oh my God, one of my like, you know, teen idols is sitting in the room with me. But no, other than that, I haven't like come in that close of proximity
That's
to him.
crazy. Wow.
I
That's
know.
amazing.
I know, and he does. At the time, he wasn't living in Nashville, but he was kind of going there, and I think he does actually live there now. But so he was, yeah, like hanging out, playing with people down there, and writing
Hmm.
with
Hmm.
songwriters there, as many musicians end up there eventually, because
Yeah.
yeah, it's just kind of a good place to get music stuff done. Um but no, I didn't I did I didn't get to meet him and make a fool of myself like I did. I was just thinking, I've been lucky to meet a few heroes, but there was a pretty recent one. This was about a year ago. I was out in California doing a tour for my book and playing gigs, but I had a night off, and a friend invited me to go see Richard Thompson at this
Wow.
really cool theater in Santa Cruz. And he was like, my friend is like a film producer. Eric Nelson is his name, and I think he's worked on stuff with Richard, and he was like, I can't believe you've never met him, and you two should like, you know, really like meet up. And so he wanted to introduce me to him. So, you know, he brought me backstage, and Richard was there like lounging on a couch, just
Oh
playing
gosh.
incredible guitar, just being super relaxed and super cool, and just playing like song after song. It was just like, this is such a privilege to be here. And and then we were, you know, gonna like give him his space and head out, and so we were saying our goodbyes, and I said, well, he was wearing, you know, like those kind of like long shorts that come down, like, you know, my daughter calls them shants, as in thou shan't wear them. But they're like shorts, but so he was wearing them, and you know, just like real casual, and then he stood up when we left, and I said like, you're not going to wear that on stage, are you? Tonight, are you going to wear those shorts? And I just just felt like, and I don't know why, I just said like the most, I don't know, like I just felt like such an idiot. I really was. You know, that I've had it happen in the other way, where I met someone who liked my music, and they like basically offended me by saying
Uh-huh.
something, and I finally kind of understood, you know, why. Like I just said like the first thing that popped in my head, and it just felt like really kind of insulting, and I just, thankfully he chuckled and was very, you know, like wry about it, and didn't make me feel bad, but I thought like, wow, that is just, I did not make a good impression.
Did he wear the shorts on stage?
No, he didn't.
Oh,
No,
okay.
no, he didn't. So I guess, and there you say these things like, and there's so much going through your head, like, well, we're in Santa Cruz, and it's probably would be really fine, like it's such a laid back place, and anyway, but I did not mean to like talk about like fashion choices with him, but that was anyway. So, any
Incredible.
shameful stories from your end?
Shameful. Oh, sure. I'm trying to think. Hmm. Yeah, I'm fairly sure that I've probably embarrassed myself pretty handily in front of people who I really admire. Um, Although like kind of on the flip side, I mean, I've interviewed a lot of people because I do some journalism, and it's really interesting to like talk to these people who you admire so much, and you realize exactly how human they are. So
Uh-huh.
like I was doing this and just how weird they are too. I was doing this story on NRBQ, who's like one of my absolute favorite bands, and um it was right around the time that Terry Adams was taking the name, but not the other guys with him out on
Right.
tour, and they were sort of in a fight. And Tommy Ardolino was really sick, and this was like right before he passed away. And so I was calling all of the guys from NRBQ to do interviews with them, which was like super exciting, and I was totally spazzing. And and like each one of them is so different. Like their dispositions are like Joey is like almost just like most laid back kind of guy. He's almost like just he's really really chill, whereas Terry Adams is like just kind of exactly as
So
insane as he is on
wired.
stage.
Yeah,
And like, so
yeah,
yeah, and I
yeah.
spoke to Terry, like, and I had a great call with him, and he was really, upbeat and, just like kind of speedy and like, talking a lot. But then he kind of just kept calling me, like, cause he had more things that he wanted to get off his mind. And so I would be like out and about, and I would see that like Terry Adams was calling my cell phone, which is just like the strangest thing to have to deal with, because it's like, well, I guess Terry Adams is calling me now, who is a deity to me. And then, yeah, but he
Absolutely.
had one more thing to add to his remarks, and I'd have to figure out a way to like set up my recording equipment really quick so I could get him. But he's exactly what, you'd expect him to be. So that was actually really cool, and that was a really fun set of interviews. And Al Anderson is like really nice and just very southern charming kind of guy. And yeah, I mean, that was one of the cooler ones. I'm trying to come up with a good one where I really humiliated myself, though. Gosh, I wish I had come prepared with
Well,
a good
there's
humiliating
still
story.
time to when shows start up again, and I'm sure there'll be chances to to screw up big time. It's gonna happen.
For sure.
It's it's bound to.
So I mean, my understanding, like, like actually the way that I met you and Eric, who I also admire very much, and before we were like friends and worked together on stuff and played shows together, like, was because I got to share a bill with you because you invited me to open for you at the Jam and Java in Vienna,
Oh,
Virginia.
right, right.
And so I was obviously super nervous to do that, but like it's so cool when like somebody who you really admire reaches out and you get to play a bill with them. And so I mean, like, I have to think, having read your memoir, but also like just knowing who you are, that you probably shared some pretty big bills with some people who maybe you admire or maybe don't admire. Like, do you have any good stories from the road?
Well, I guess I, I did get to do some good opening slots. You know, first with the band Last Roundup that I had back in the 80s, and we were, a country. We called ourselves urban hillbilly, but it was country punk. Some people called it, or cow punk. Now they just call it like Americana, but we got to play some pretty good bills with, like, we played with Bill Monroe. That was, I think, maybe
Nice.
one of the most memorable, and that was at this club called Fitzgerald's in Houston, and Bill pretty much hung out on the tour bus, but we were sharing the dressing room with the Bluegrass Boys, who, like, at the time just seemed like, oh my God, they're like men my father's age, they're at least 40, and they were like getting dressed, they're putting, just like, and they wore those amazing suits, and it just felt really kind of like, should we be here? I don't know. It just felt like they were like serious,
Mhm.
musicians who had like worked so long and hard, and just like took it so seriously. And I mean, not to say we took it seriously too, but it was kind of a lark at the same time. So um I just remember one of the guys like actually had like, I don't know, it was like a girdle or like one of those, things that people who've had a hernia wear, and it just was like, this is, you know, I just felt like we entered this whole other universe of of like grown men that we
Mhm.
just like had not earned that right to be there. But I think yeah, definitely some of those country artists, it just felt like they'd, to get where they were, they'd just done so much and worked so hard, and so it was always very intimidating.
Mhm.
Um, and then I guess yeah, getting to do a tour with Warren Zevon. That was, walking into the dressing room the first night in Minneapolis, and it was just like super cold out, and it was like January, and just walking in there, and just like thinking, I'd seen him do a sound check, so I kind of like established, that he was like a real person and there, but he was just sitting there, and he was just so nice. He was really kind to me, and just made me feel really welcome, and he was funny, and but I felt so shy and intimidated around him. I did all these shows with him, and we'd hang out, and he was always, like, we ate together sometimes, and but uh but then like about a year later, he was playing in Nashville, and I went to see him, and Jill Sobule was opening,
Mhm.
and so and like she fucking brought him out on stage. He sang Jackson with her, and I was like, oh my God, like, did she like, I would never have had the nerve to ask him to like come out and accompany me or like do a song together, but maybe I should have. I guess I learned something there, and that is like, don't, they, like you said, like, your heroes, they're like people too, and they're just as shy, if they're a performer and an artist, chances are they're as like shy and kind of like insecure as we are,
Mhm.
and they're kind of like, they don't want to impose themselves on you, just like you don't want to like impose yourself on them. And so yeah, I just felt like, oh damn, like, why didn't I like ask him to play something with me? And I don't know. But anyway, that you live and learn these things.
I am that's amazing actually. That's audacious that she did that and she actually got him to
She's a
do it.
ballsy woman,
She
like
sure
she's
is.
really got like, she's I admire her tremendously, and probably felt like terrified. I actually went into the studio when she was mixing I Kissed a Girl,
Mhm.
her, original song, back in the 90s, was working with a producer that I knew in Nashville, and I went in there while they were mixing that song, at the Woodland Studios in Nashville, and met her, and yeah, I was like
Yeah.
afraid to meet her, but she's got nerves of steel. She's got balls. She's really, cool in that way. Not to say she doesn't get like scared and stuff too, but she just like pushes through.
Amazing. Um, so is there anybody who you wish you could have met that either was a missed opportunity because they're no longer with us or um
I guess, yeah, Tom Petty for sure. I mean, I back when he did the Fillmore stand in San Francisco back in the 90s, late 90s, and he had a different act every night, a different
mhm.
artist or band open, and I was like on the short list to like be one of the openers, and it was just like, oh my god, um, I would have I would have loved that, but I just always um, even I wrote that song Tom Petty karaoke, and
Yeah.
one of the lines is, I always thought we'd meet. Maybe we did. Maybe we did. Because just seems like we should have.
Yeah,
What about
totally.
you?
Um I wish that I could have met Joe Strummer. Um
Mhm.
I just, I wish that he was still here in general. I think about him a lot and I think like, man, what would Joe say right
Uh-huh.
now about what's going on? And I think that to myself often. And I just think he seemed like just a very cool and sort of, overall great human. And maybe he'd be a little out of it, but I think I could hang with a little out of it. I just think he would be nice. And I just admire him so much. And did you actually meet him or were you just in a room with him?
I didn't actually meet him, but a scene in my book after we saw the Clash play at the Palladium in New York City, and then there was this big party going on down on Second Avenue, and everyone was just like on a high from seeing the Clash for the first time, and then someone said like the Clash are here, and like in my mind, and this I could have made this. I mean, they definitely did come, but
Mhm.
in my mind they're like framed in this freight elevator like on a record cover, like just silhouetted, like um and then they just like went and grabbed a beer. So but I didn't actually get to meet him, but it felt like he would they seemed cool and like super nice, and like not it seemed like everybody was just gonna like have have a good time together, and they I mean, by I'm sure they got like more like famous and all that, and maybe became more intimidating, but they just
Mhm.
seemed like guys who had just like blown our minds, and so
So
they were
awesome.
guys and gods at the same time.
Man.
um it seems like we have a mailbag question.
Oh, mailbag.
Yeah. What's the first album you remember listening to as a child that made you think you wanted to be a musician?
Oh, that's a really cool question. My dad listens to a lot of classical music. And I was taking piano lessons at the time, but was not really all that serious about it. And then
Mhm.
I think he played me, I can't remember the exact record or recording, but he played some Beethoven sonatas and I was
Wow.
very like blown away by like, oh, like you can do more than just play like the St. Elmo's Fire theme song. Like so show I've never seen, but somehow know how to play the theme to. Um, so I think when I realized like that there's this instrument that has this tremendous capacity, and I, was allowed to take lessons, I became a little bit more serious about it. Obviously, I'm not a very good classical musician, but I took it really serious for a long time, and I think that was the little key turner for me, which is maybe a little bit pretentious, but I would be lying if it wasn't, listening to classical music with my dad and just trying to to be better.
Wow.
How
That's
about you?
Um, well, it's interesting that they say albums because, like, as a child, I grew up in the '60s, and it was really more singles,
Mhm.
that grabbed me, like all the great kind of songs that I'd hear on the radio, like "Ode to Billy Joe" and signed, sealed, delivered, just like all kinds of like pop songs. But my parents had, and it wasn't albums didn't like become a thing to me until like the early '70s. And that was like Led Zeppelin and The Who, Quadrophenia. I remember I had an older brother, still do, but like, and he kind of brought these albums home, and of course like Elton John's albums were kind of like my first albums. But my parents, I remember so well that Burt Bacharach album, Reach Out, and it was the one, like he sings on that one. And it's just got like those film strips, and I just like, and there's him like kind of like, conducting and playing the piano, just so it didn't make me think I was going to be a musician, but it just, I like that whole world of music, and
Mhm.
that was definitely one of those albums. And then of course, that Herb Alpert and the Tijuana Brass, that
Yes.
Whipped Cream and Other Delights, like who didn't like stare at that woman covered in whipped cream for just like, just days on end and go, like, I don't know if I'll ever play music, but like whatever world these people are in that came up with this, I want to be part of that world. Um,
Yeah, yeah, that one was big in our house too, actually. I guess it just came if you bought a home in the suburbs or something, like there was just a copy of it just left behind because
Yes,
I
yes.
mean,
I love that. Yeah. I know I found a picture the other day on the internet of, well, I did go to a record store in Philadelphia a couple years ago, and he had like a whole section that was nothing but that album. It was just like every rack, it was just like the wall was covered with them. And then I found a photo of a shop that, they had an installation at one point where just like every rack had nothing but copies. Like there are so many copies of that album out there, and it's never gets old.
yeah, I would love to. I guess this would be a really boring podcast, but to interview the person who was involved in like the distribution chain of that, such that like because they're just being sold back to every record store now, I guess, and that's
Right.
why they have a zillion copies of it. So I'd be wondering, like, I would be interested to know, like, why did they decide to press like I don't know, apparently 10 million copies
And
of
what strikes me, and I don't know how this could be a whole other part of it. I mean, the whole podcast could be devoted to that album. Why there are so many different colors of green. Like you could get 10 copies and each one would be a completely different color. Now, but it's all green, but it's just like slight variations. And is it because they were stored in the sunlight or not, or just it's the printing?
yeah.
Like they must have printed them in like 100 different places, and every printing configuration of like however the ink flowed, it just like turned into like a slightly different color of green. It's really, you just never knew so many of the same color could be so different.
No, it's incredible just considering how small like production is at this point and how it's like not anything like I mean I guess I'm speaking from the sort of indie perspective of it all that like not a lot of people are printing vinyl anymore and so like and you're not doing millions and millions of copies at various plants. And so
Right, exactly.
it
So
seems like a relic of, this recording industry when there was like actually a recording industry and people really wanted this Herb Alpert record, maybe, or I don't know, maybe it was
yeah,
just a,
and pressing plants just all over the place, just like, cranking out these jackets that were all like slightly different, but all had the whipped cream.
oh, very, very bold album cover. And yeah. Well, maybe we can tackle that next week. But I don't know. This was fun. It was fun talking to one of my heroes. So
Oh, well,
I'm glad that we got to discuss heroes today. So
yeah, it's and I loved I see you tweet about these like different albums and different artists, and you did a great one about John Cale yesterday that just made me want to go down a whole John Cale rabbit hole. And that was another book I just read, was Betsy Johnson's
oh,
memoir,
nice.
and she um, had been married to him, and she called him her favorite husband. She was married a
Oh,
couple.
wow.
She was married a couple times, and so she was sort of like a childhood idol of mine. And she came to, when I went to Parsons, she came and um, talked to the school, at the new school, and one of my friends like stood up and said like, "What was it like being married to Cale?" Which
No
is something,
way.
just like, you were married to John Cale, and it was kind of cool that he asked her that, because that's what we all wanted to know, what it was like. But
Oh, I
anyway,
had no idea. Wow.
but you've got just such a knowledge of all these different records. You're just like so into it. I love it. I can't keep up
Helps
with
to be
you.
a fan. Oh, thank you.
Well,
Well, I look forward to talking to you next
yeah,
week.
me too.
All right. See ya.